Hey there, this is Andy Grider, and I'm the host and producer of Unique This Week. It's a production of Uniqueness is Power. You can check us out at uniquenessispower.com and see all the marvelous shows we have. But right now, we're bringing you somebody who is well beyond the norm on Unique. In fact, he's probably one of the most unique and interesting individuals I've ever met. I've had the good occasion to become good friends with him, business partners with him, and we've done a lot of cool things together. Charles Fellingham might have come up with one of the most original and cool ideas here that I've ever seen, though. It's something called Purple Podium, and it's working on both sides of the political aisle to help political wannabes and political office holders increase their ability to communicate with the public, especially from behind the podium. So, Charles, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Great to be with you, Andy. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Always an absolute pleasure. And so, what we have, as a name, Purple Podium. What a great name! You've got your blue, you've got your red. You put them together, you got purple. These two parties have never been more diverse, and it's probably one of the most onerous tasks you could probably try to take on, Charles. So, can you talk a little bit about how this came about?
Oh, let me talk about the genesis of the Purple Podium. It's kind of an interesting one. As you know, Andy, I've had a lot of experience in industry, having worked for a Fortune 500 company for many years. And avocationally during that time, in industry, I was teaching Dale Carnegie courses on weekends and evenings with a particular focus on presentation skills. That was sort of my area of expertise. And I was getting a lot of attention from the Dale Carnegie organization in my work there, and they were sending lots of clients my way. And I was approached by a gentleman who I was training with, Andre O'Brien, who was my partner in the Purple Podium. And he was involved with a political organization in Georgia at the time. And he approached me and said that there's a political organization that would like some presentation skills training. And I said, well, tell me more about it. And it was Johnny Eisen's organization, for anybody who knows politics in Georgia. It was a very well-known congressman in the state of Georgia, and he had approached Andre and was asking for an expert in presentation skills. And I turned to Andre and I said, so that organization is asking you for an expert in presentation skills, and if they don't know or have somebody lined up, and they should have a long list of people that do that, then there's probably a business here. And that's when we formed the Purple Podium, and it's just really grown from there.
And it really has. So, I mean, I've been fortunate to sort of be a sideline observationist here as this is all taken off. But when you're working with candidates, if you're obviously going to be working with candidates from both sides of the aisle, I know one of the projects we just talked about recently, you're working on trying to figure out how to bridge the gap for both sides, really. And so, what kind of coursework do you do with the speakers? I know it's presentation skills, but as I understand it, it goes far beyond that.
Yeah, we have a 1-day and a 2-day workshop. The 1-day workshop is really all about the fundamental skills of running a candidacy. I mean, becoming a candidate and doing it effectively. And those things include, announcing your candidacy, how to state your position, how to work on a rope line in the moment with questions coming at you rapid fire. And so the 2-day workshop is more complete than that because we get into how to develop your position around the issues, how to be a great presenter in front of large groups of people, and be dynamic and be animated, but sincere and authentic and genuine. So we have a small version and a larger version. And right now, the smaller version is more popular.
So you've done enough of these now. What's the feedback from the candidates like that you're helping? I mean, what kind of things are they learning? What kind of feedback do you get? What do they tell you?
Very good. It's interesting. I oftentimes will work with these candidates who are running for state office. Generally, those are the candidates we're working with. And when they come into the room, whether it's the 1-day or 2-day, they're generally all on the same party, because the parties I don't think they'll get in a room together and work out. It just doesn't work that way. But I'll ask them 3 questions. Go ahead. Yeah.
Not more, right?
Right. Right. No, with the polarized environment we're in, that they'd rather work, with their own. But one thing we don't do is we don't teach them how to sort of throw red meat to their base. We teach them how to represent themselves in a way that would appeal to everybody, but still be able to express their issues in the context of their beliefs and the context of perhaps, what their particular party or platform or whatever is representing.
Well, I know you've asked a series of 3 questions to get them started to see where they're at. Can you go through those for our listeners so they understand what kind of things these politicians are being asked to answer?
Yeah, it's amazing, because they'll come in and I'll line them up, Andre and I, and we'll line them up, and then we'll say, so we need for you to just step forward and answer 3 questions. First question is, why are you running? Why are you uniquely qualified to hold this position? Why should we vote for you? And if they can't answer those 3 questions, they're in trouble.
Well, you're not just talking about skills, you're talking about answering those questions in a way that, whether it's town hall or the press or somebody just stopping them and asking that question,
Yeah.
those are questions that have to be answered.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest mistake you think a lot of these candidates are generally making? Is there a general statement you can make about that? Is there something they all need to work on generally?
Lack of brevity.
Ah, well, sign me up for that one too, Charles.
They should say, it should be sound bites. They should say it clear, concise, and powerful.
How self-aware are these candidates?
Well, in my leadership training, which is something else I do, which is another subject, I view the strongest core competency of any leader as self-awareness. And so that's one of the things we assess during the workshop. Because with self-awareness, if you don't have that kind of self-awareness, then you have a lot of blind spots.
Right.
And it restricts your ability to be aware of what's happening around you. And excellent politicians need to be very aware of what's happening around them.
Right, exactly. Well, and also, I think that you and I have discussed this before. If you don't believe in what you're talking about, people are going to know that.
Yeah.
If you're not being sincere, if you're not being concise, if you're not being powerful and meaningful and relevant, you're going to end up, out of touch with your base, and your base is going to be very out of touch with you, and they're not going to vote for you.
Yeah, they're looking for candidates who are genuine, authentic, natural, relaxed, their best self, and a good communicator.
Right. Well, and another thing that's really difficult to teach, although I guess you could coach, is conviction and belief.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that if you've got somebody that's hurting on the seeming convicted or seeming like they fully believe in fact they should be there?
It's a fine line they walk. I mean, their beliefs and convictions should come out in a strong way. Yet they have to be careful, because if their beliefs and convictions are stated in such a way that it alienates a large percentage of the population that would vote for them, then their chances of going into office where they can follow through with their convictions and beliefs is minimized. Let's take an example. I think the big issue of this next election that will kind of divide voters is the abortion issue.
Yeah.
And one side believes that the woman should have the right to control what happens to her body. The other side believes that life begins at conception. That's a life, and it needs to have the opportunity to live its life. And so that's a big divide. And how the candidates are positioning themselves on that issue is very interesting to watch. And we're seeing, particularly perhaps on the Republican side, a morphing of the message. They're moving more away from pro-life to preferred life. And the reason they're changing their position is they realize that particular issue could restrict them from having national office in either the Senate or the presidency or both. So we're seeing a real fight within the Republican Party about that issue, because that will be a defining issue in the next election.
I think you're hitting the nail so far on the head. It's driven straight down into the woods. So I think that's one of the many. And you just mentioned talking about a topic. One of the things I know that you do is videos of these folks making a position statement.
Yes.
And let's talk about position statements and why. I mean, you just kind of touched on it here, but let's expand on why that's so important for these politicians.
Well, it is, because that's really where the work is done. When it's one thing to represent yourself and talk about your history and all of that, and talk about your credentials. But when it comes right down to it, why are people going to pull the lever for you or fill out the ballot and mail it in, or whatever the case may be? It's probably because your stance on one or more issues. And if they don't have a sense of where you stand on issues that are important to them, they're going to migrate toward those who have a clearer stance and more of which they would agree with. So we work on clarity of position in a concise statement.
Right, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times, that going back to that first question of why should I vote for you? I think there's a lot of times that they say, well, I represent your party, or I've got a heck of a resume and therefore people should vote for me. And maybe those have a little bit of play, but they're not the be all end all answer. It's a matter of figuring out what true reasons people would have to vote for them. So can you walk through a little bit how you help define that for them?
Right. Yeah. The first thing you want to do is you want to find an area upon which everybody can agree. And so you might state, and let's talk about the economy. But you don't start with how you feel the economy should be fixed or what your position is. You start with the facts. And the facts might be, if you're on the Democrat side, the facts might be that the economy is somewhat stable, that inflation is returning to a more normal state, that the stock market is doing well. And they'll begin to bring out facts that people can agree with, and then they'll state their position because they've earned the right to do that. On the Republican side, it might be, inflation is very high, and the middle class and the lower classes are being penalized by that. And the economy is unstable and interest rates are high and people can't buy homes. And so they're going to bring their own set of facts forward. And in that way, they earn the right to state their position, which should be a solution. Oftentimes, the candidates make the mistake of not going that far,
right?
Which they need to.
Exactly. I think your positioning point is so important here, Charles, and I think it's something we should probably circle back on. This is something that I think is good for anyone that's speaking to the public in any way, is to understand that you don't want to be combative out of the gate. You want to express facts, and then you want to move people towards your facts through a persuasive argument. So again, when you're working with these politicians, is this something that you find that they are able to do and make it palatable, digestible, even inspiring?
Yeah. When I work with them, we encourage them to get the facts. When we start working, we find out that, doing their homework is something that they feel motivated to do, but the follow through is a little light. So they should have, I think, fact sheets, position statements sheets for every one of the major issues that have facts, that also state, here's why it's important we talk about it, or here's the impact on the population or the constituency, and here's the prescription for fixing it, and here's the action that people listening can take to help follow through. And that represents a complete position statement. One of the areas that is fact-based, but where we do a certain amount of work, is in storytelling.
Right.
Because a story is a fact. It's something that actually happened. And the better candidates are at telling stories, I think the more effective they'll be in their campaigns.
Well, it's funny, you and I all too recently spoke about the rule of holes, and after watching the debate the other night, I watched a few people not observe your
Yeah.
your sage advice of when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Uh-huh.
What do you want someone to do when they do? Let's say they say something and they realize they've stepped in it, or they realize they've got a hot button that they haven't handled well. What's the best way for them to handle that?
Yeah. Uh, what is it? The strong, calm person is always revered as a leader. And if you make a mistake, admit it emphatically and quickly. Because people are forgiving when you do. When you don't, and they know you made a mistake, then you'll be in the hole with the shovel digging when you should really stop. So we encourage people, if they say something that they really want to take back and restate, then do it quick.
Yeah, and then move on from there.
And then move on from there.
Yeah. So one of the things we also talked about was taking sound bites and turning them into, I believe your term was bumper stickers.
Right.
So how does someone find those bites? How do you find the things that are going to crystallize and move in that proper direction?
And so we're constantly during the training, as they're stating their position, we look at them and say, how can you say that in 10 words or less and not lose the passion or strength? So we're driving them to use their own words and use their own instinct, but we want that inner voice to be there when they're on the campaign trail. How can I say this in 10 words or less and make it memorable, make it repeatable? Because chances are, if you have a longer statement, you've got more to be taken out of context. If you have a short statement that's standalone and meaningful and clear, then it's less likely it'll be taken out of context.
So part of it is the listener and part of it is the press.
Well, and you have to deal with both.
Yes, absolutely. So you've mentioned earlier that oftentimes this is going to be one party in the room at a time.
Yes.
Another thing that I think comes up is because you have yourself and Andre in the room teaching it usually at the same time, you also have the candidates sort of helping teach each other and figure out what the red meat message is and where that all goes. So how does that work with the workshops? Can you walk through a little bit of how that works?
Sure. It's interesting when they come in, we take a poll, what is your expectation here? And the expectations and we're working with both parties. Expectation is that we're going to teach them how to throw red meat to their base. And that is not what we do. What we do is teach them how to clearly represent themselves well, state their position in a persuasive way that's fact-based, clear, concise, and powerful. That could appeal to a broader spectrum of voters than just the base. The base message will be there, but it's stated in such a way that it opens people's minds. Because if you state your position emphatically up front, it shuts the minds down. But if you state the facts up front and the impact or importance as to why we need to talk about this issue, then more minds remain open. And then when you offer your prescription, which could be red meat or it could be a more a central position, people are more inclined to listen.
Agreed. So one other thing, we just sort of brushed on it just a second ago. You've got your constituency and your potential voters sort of as one audience, as one audience. And then you have the press, which is also a whole other audience. So when someone is a politician wanting to be a politician, most likely the person that's been doing media their whole life is going to be better at the media than the person who's the politician. So how do you work around that disadvantage? How do you work around working with them so that they don't end up in the crosshairs, as it were?
So don't make the media your enemy. The whole idea that the media is going to do what the media does. You have no control over that. There are people that will misrepresent you, that will take you out of context, that will misstate what you're saying, that will turn it in a way that they want to. But you don't want to make the media your enemy because you don't want to turn the media into a piranha pool. You just want them to be a press pool. And the better you are at being clear or clarifying your statements or responding to the media after that they've made a mistake or misrepresented you or taken it out of context, be sure to respond to that. Don't let it go. so that there's always a refutation out there should the media, which they do, not understand clearly your position, your context, your words.
Whether that be intentional or otherwise. Yes.
Right.
As a former member of the press, I am recovering from having been taught to do those things. So the other thing that I will mention is we've mentioned understanding your message. We've mentioned research and facts and basing things in facts and setting things up that way for a good political presentation. One other thing that I think is absolutely key, and I know you stress it, is practice. How often should they be practicing these speeches and these sound bites and everything else to get themselves ready for the next steps?
Yeah, they should certainly as often as possible. They should practice stating their position with the structure that we offer, which is what the issue is, what the facts are, why it's important to talk about it, what the prescription is, what next. And we drill it. And we give them that template that they're able to then work with, so that when they're with their staff, or they're with, somebody where they can drill and practice and rehearse to hone their message and make it more clear, concise, and powerful, then they have the opportunity to be more skilled in front of in front of the press, or in front of a listening constituency.
I know you also have some pretty interesting ways to get them to draw these things out when they're in the workshops, whether that's looking at building dynamic levels or animation or vocal dynamics or any of those types of things. How does that usually go over? Are they really surprised when they see all the pieces that really go into this?
Yeah. Yeah, when you overstretch something, it does not go back to its natural shape oftentimes. And so we overstretch in terms of developing animation, vocal power, vocal dynamics, use of gestures, movement, facial expressions, all of this. We go over that, and we have some exercises that really take them out of their comfort zone. And it's fun. I mean, it's very entertaining, because we take movie monologues and we have them read 10 different ways. And the ways are designed to isolate gestures and voice and face and movement and other things, so that when they're done with that, they will come back to a level where they are not the same monotonish, unanimated, boring speaker that they were before. So they love that part. As a matter of fact, in the feedback that we get after the sessions, that seems to be the favorite.
Awesome. So, Charles, if someone wants to get in touch with you, either as a political candidate who wants to improve or wants to actually figure out how they're moving forward, or maybe somebody who wants executive or sales coaching, because I know you do that as well, what are the best ways? I mean, purplepodium.com, obviously, but what else how else can they reach you?
Just go to my my email address, charlesfellingham@gmail.com. And Fellingham is like Bellingham, Washington, but with an F. And I'm very good, very responsive. So just send me an email and let me know what you'd like to do, and we'll have a conversation.
Well, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here, Charles. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Anytime, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Andy Grider, and I'm the host and producer of Unique This Week. It's a production of uniquenessispower.com. Check out the website. Please pass this on to anybody you know who's an aspiring political candidate, because as Charles alluded to at the beginning of this, there's really nobody else out there doing this, and there should be. There should be numerous companies doing this. There are not. And what they provide and what they bring is actually a better political candidate for all of us as constituents, better choices. And much more understandable positions and different on all the different issues. So again, thank you very much, Charles, for being here, and we will see everybody again next week.